He raised his hand to answer the question, just like everyone else. But the teacher paused, eyes narrowing. "Let's hear from someone more prepared," she snapped, skipping over him for the 5th time that week. The class went silent. His face flushed. Then as he packed his bag to leave, she whispered, "Attitude like that won't get you far." But what she didn't know, someone had recorded everything, and it was already going viral. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Malik Trenham's foot crossed the threshold of room 213, just as the final echo of the bell died in the corridor. He carried his backpack slung low, textbooks pressed against his chest, his heart hammering from the 15-second sprint down the hall. 2 seconds late, 2 seconds past the cutoff Miss Cranley had rigidly enforced. He slowed, tried to catch his breath. Every eye in the hallway seemed to flick up, then away, as though someone had struck a gong of silence. Inside, the classroom's fluorescent lights hummed. Rows of desks stood rigid, notebooks open, pencils poised. A hush blanketed the students. Malik's pulse thudded in his ears. He felt the shift in pressure, as if the air itself recoiled. Miss Cranley stood at the front beside a smartboard, arms crossed, jaw tight. She didn't glance at him first, but Malik knew she had already seen. He moved slowly to back row seat 12, trying to be unobtrusive, trying to let the moment pass. But Miss Cranley's footsteps cut through the silence like a blade. She came directly at him, her eyes narrow. The room inhaled. Students froze mid-breath. "Mr. Trenham," she said, her voice low but piercing. Malik's throat tightened. He swallowed. He didn't answer. She leaned down and grabbed the strap of his backpack, the one with a hidden pin of a black panther he wore to honor his late grandfather. Without warning, she yanked it free from beneath him and tossed it toward the door. Books tumbled. Papers fluttered. The bag hit the wall with a dull thud before sliding across the floor into the hallway. "Maybe next time you'll remember you're not special," she muttered, her tone soft enough for some to miss but clear enough for everyone to hear. A flush of shock spiked through the classroom. Malik's hands shook, his chest constricted. He felt his cheeks burn. His classmates stared, mouths half open. Some eyes flickered between him and Miss Cranley, unsure whether to intervene or pretend nothing happened. After a moment, one of the girls 2 desks ahead whispered, "Miss Cranley." That was, but she was cut off by a stiff gesture. Miss Cranley turned, dismissed the daughter with an icy stare, and strode back to her podium as though nothing untoward had occurred. Malik sat frozen, unable to move. His textbooks lay in pieces on the floor. He stared at his empty desk. The laughter in the hallway had stopped. The pencil tappers had gone silent. The world felt suspended. He reached out to his friend Jordan, seated a row ahead. Jordan's eyes were fixed on him, wide and alarmed, but he said nothing. Malik's hand trembled as he tried to get up, to at least collect his things, but his limbs felt heavy, rooted to the chair. Miss Cranley cleared her throat. "Let us begin." She raised her voice, ironically calm. "Take out your notes from last week's assignment." She flicked a marker across the board and started writing a date. Nothing more. She ignored the scattered books, and Malik's absent. As the class shuffled to comply, Malik looked toward the open door, toward the hallway. His bag lay half in, half out, like a wounded thing, abandoned. Someone might trip over it, someone might laugh. He felt humiliation wash over him, hot and scalding. This wasn't the first time Miss Cranley had singled him out. In earlier months, she had never called on him. She gave him the cold shoulder. She organized seating so he sat alone against the wall. She left his questions unanswered while she answered others. The teacher's lounge murmured of attitude problems rather than handling of black boys. But Malik swallowed each slight quietly, built a ledger in his notebooks and tried to survive. Still, this public display changed something. It carved a line in the hallway's shadows. Malik realized the threshold between what she tolerated and what she would tolerate had already been crossed. As class progressed, Malik stared at the smartboard. His mind drifted. He replayed the seconds before the throw. Miss Cranley's eyes, her lips pressed thin. The sudden lunge. He felt the sting of her words. "You're not special," echo in his bones. He recognized how little he mattered in her eyes. Jordan shifted next to him, whispered under his breath, "You okay?" Malik's heart hammered. He nodded, barely, unable to speak without trembling. At the same time, the room around him whispered, pages flipping, Pens, scribbling, Miss Cranley's narration about the Civil War beginning. But Malik felt disconnected, distant. He watched her lips shape sentences about battles and peace treaties, while his world narrowed to shame and fear. He realized something else. In that split second before his bag fell, Miss Cranley had paused. She had seen something that provoked anger, not tardiness. She had judged more than his being 2 seconds late. She had judged him. The class wore on. 10 minutes passed. 20. Malik's eyes flicked to the doorway again. The hallway light seemed dull, distant. He rubbed at the back of his neck. The humiliation weighed heavier by the second. Then in the corner of his vision, he noticed something unexpected. A phone half hidden behind a desk leg, in the row across from him. He glimpsed the screen glow, a finger holding it steady, camera pointed directly at him. The student's hand froze when their eyes caught Malik's. The camera didn't lower. It stayed pointed. Malik's chest lurched. He wanted that phone gone, destroyed, unseen, but he couldn't move. He swallowed hard. The student's finger hovered near stop recording, but didn't press it. Miss Cranley turned, looked directly at that student for a heartbeat too long, then dismissed the glance. She resumed writing on the board. The student quickly lowered the camera, sliding it out of sight. But Malik understood. Someone had captured the entire incident. A brittle energy sparked inside him. Anger, fear, disbelief. He clenched and unclenched his fists. His breath came shallow. A new question formed. What would that video do? The period ended. The bell rang. Students began gathering their things. Malik stayed rooted. He couldn't seem to stand. Jordan nudged him gently. Come on. His voice trembled. Unsure. Malik collected what remained of his books. His bag limp and limp. His insides hollow. As he walked out, students passed him with averted eyes. As though he were a ghost. No one asked. No one offered. He hit the hallway. It felt colder here. He looked at the floor, the walls, his shaking hands unfolding the strap of his bag. He saw the phone again behind the desk down the hall. It seemed to flicker like a beacon. He stepped toward the exit. And at that moment, the hallway door opened unexpectedly. Miss Cranley's silhouette loomed in the doorway. The hallway quieted. Students froze mid-step. Collisions avoided. She held her posture, shoulders squared, lips pressed. Malik halted, his bag dangling from one hand. He felt her gaze descend on him. Hot, calculating. He looked away quickly. Swallowed. Mr. Trenham, she said, her voice level but cold. Stay after class. A wave of dread knocked at his chest. 100 questions screamed. Why? For what? Will she punish him further? Will she deny she even did it? He nodded. Barely. The other students filed past. Some cast glances. Some faces were unreadable. Malik walked on, each step heavy, toward a future he did not choose. But what the teacher didn't know, someone had caught the whole thing on video, and that recording would set off a storm no one saw coming. The classroom had emptied, but Malik's mind still sat at his desk, even as he walked down the hall with his bag hanging heavy on his shoulder. Every nerve in his body throbbed with the echo of Miss Cranley's voice. He could still see her fingers clutching the strap, hear the dull thud of his bag striking the wall. 2 seconds late, that was all it had taken to strip away whatever dignity he had left in that room. He didn't go straight to the cafeteria. He didn't even go to his next class. Instead, he slipped quietly into the library's far corner, the place where the fluorescent lights buzzed softer and where nobody ever came except for a few kids who needed to charge their phone. He sank into a chair at the back, away from the windows, and pulled out the old black-spined journal from his bag. It had a bent corner and a coffee stain on the front, but inside it was meticulous, rows and rows of neat handwriting. For months he had been writing everything down. Every time a teacher used words like aggressive or disruptive in his file when he'd simply asked a question. Every time his locker was randomly searched. Every time he was sent to the principal's office for what other students did with a warning. He didn't tell his parents. He didn't tell his friends. He didn't even tell Jordan, because he knew what the label angry black kid did to someone like him. It stuck like tar. It followed you. He flipped to the most recent page, dated just last week. Group project reassigned because teacher said my tone was off. He turned another page. Principal said hoodie was gang-like. Another, locker checked 3 times this semester. Jordan never. His eyes darted across the ink, fast but deliberate. The journal was his safety net, the only place where his reality couldn't be dismissed as paranoia. His hand trembled as he uncapped his pen. He started a new entry. History class. 2 seconds late. Bag thrown. You're not special. He hesitated, then underlined the phrase. Not once, but 3 times. The pen cut deep into the paper. Underneath, in smaller letters, he wrote what he'd been afraid to say aloud. She thinks she's untouchable. He stared at the words. They stared back. It wasn't the first time he'd written that about Miss Cranley. He flipped back to an earlier section of the journal. There it was again, underlined in February, and again in March, scrawled in frustration after she'd accused him of mocking her tone when he had repeated a question she ignored. 3 separate times, same phrase, same teacher. Malik closed the journal halfway, his thumb pressed in the crease. The phrase haunted him now. Untouchable, like she operated in a different world with different rules, like there was nothing he could do that would ever matter. But something in him shifted as he stared at it. The humiliation from the bag incident was still raw, but underneath it was a flicker of something else. Resolve. He whispered under his breath, so softly even he barely heard it. Enough. The word startled him. It hung in the quiet library like an echo. He pressed his palm flat on the journal, and for the first time felt it not just as a record but as a weapon. Evidence. Outside, the library's glass door creaked. Footsteps approached. Malik quickly slid the journal back into his bag and straightened up. Jordan appeared between the stacks, glancing around nervously before stepping closer. Man, I've been looking for you, Jordan said in a low voice. You okay? Malik forced a shrug. Yeah. Fine. Jordan frowned. That was messed up back there. She can't just… She did, Malik cut in. He didn't mean to sound sharp, but the words burned on his tongue. Jordan hesitated, then leaned against the shelf. Look, you know Kelsey recorded it, right? Malik blinked. What? Jordan lowered his voice. Kelsey, the girl in second row. She had her phone out the whole time. She got the bag thing. She showed me after class. Malik's heart lurched. She still got it? I think so. She's freaked out though. Said she's not sure if she should post it. Malik sat back stunned. He had imagined it, the glow of the phone. But to know for sure there was video. It felt like a door cracking open. Jordan lowered his gaze. I mean, you've been writing all this stuff down for months, right? Malik's eyes narrowed. How do you know that? Jordan shrugged. You always have that notebook. I figured it wasn't math notes. Malik looked away. He didn't want to explain the journal. He didn't want to say how each page had been a lifeline. But he could feel Jordan watching him, waiting. Finally, Malik said quietly, it's just keeping track. In case one day I need to show somebody. Jordan nodded slowly. Well, maybe that day's coming. Malik exhaled. He hadn't realized he was holding his breath. The 2 boys sat there for a moment, the hum of the lights filling the silence. Malik's fingers brushed the edge of his journal. For the first time, he thought of it not as proof for himself, but as proof for the world. I'm not crazy, Malik said, almost to himself. I'm not making it up. I know, Jordan said. Malik looked up. Do you? Jordan's jaw tightened. Yeah. I see it. We all see it. We just don't say anything. Something about that stung worse than Miss Cranley's words. We all see it. We just don't say anything. Malik clenched his jaw and stared at the journal. He realized silence had been his armor, but it had also been his cage. He reached into his bag and pulled the journal out again, flipping to the first page. He skimmed through months of entries, his own handwriting chronicling a pattern nobody at school wanted to name. It was like staring at a map of an invisible city. A city of small cruelties, quiet exclusions, rules enforced only on certain kids. An unexpected chill slid down his spine. He had been so careful. But what if someone found this journal? What if it got taken? It held everything. Dates, names, times, details. It could be his proof, but it could also be used against him. He closed it, pressing it to his chest. I need a copy, he murmured. Jordan raised an eyebrow. A copy? Yeah. Digital. In case they take this. Jordan glanced around the library. We could scan it at my dad's office. He's got a scanner. Malik nodded, the decision forming even as the words left his mouth. Tonight? Tonight, Jordan said. The plan felt like a spark in Malik's chest. For the first time since his bag hit the wall, he felt a flicker of control. But as he slipped the journal back into his bag, something slid from between the pages. A folded sheet of paper he didn't recognize. He frowned, unfolding it slowly. It wasn't his handwriting. It was a printout, a screenshot from an email. The subject line read, Behavior Report, M. Trenham. Malik's stomach dropped. He scanned the text. It was an internal teacher email. Someone complaining about him being defiant and disruptive during class discussions. The date was last week. The sender Miss Cranley. The recipient Principal Halverson. But there was something odd at the bottom. A forwarded note from an unknown account. Watch your back. They're building a case. Malik stared at it, his pulse hammering. Where did this come from? He whispered. Jordan leaned over. What is that? Malik didn't answer. He couldn't. He kept scanning the page. It was real. It had the district's email signature. Someone had slipped this into his journal. Someone knew. His hands trembled. They're trying to set me up, he murmured. Jordan's face went pale. Man, what is going on? Malik folded the paper, slipped it back into the journal, and zipped his bag shut. His mind raced. If this was true, then Miss Cranley wasn't just humiliating him. She was documenting him, building a paper trail to brand him as a problem before he even had a chance to defend himself. He stood abruptly. The chair scraped against the floor. I have to go. Where? Jordan asked, alarmed. Home. I need to show my dad. Jordan reached for his arm but stopped short. Be careful, okay? Malik nodded once, his jaw set. He could feel something shifting, a tide turning. The journal he had kept for survival had suddenly become a weapon, and someone inside the system had just slipped him a warning. He headed for the door, his bag heavy but his steps quicker now. As he pushed open the library door, the late afternoon sunlight cut across his face. He felt the weight of eyes on him, though he didn't know whose. What Malik didn't know was that his quiet record-keeping was about to become evidence. Evidence that would not only expose Cranley, but drag the entire school district into the light. Malik didn't sleep much that night. After discovering the anonymous email hidden in his journal, the one warning him about Miss Cranley's behavior report, his thoughts kept spiraling. He replayed the incident in class over and over, flinching every time he imagined the bag hitting the floor. The silence, the phrase that kept clawing its way back. You're not special. By morning something in him had hardened. He dressed slowly, pulling his hoodie on tighter than usual. He zipped his backpack slowly and slipped the journal inside with reverence. It wasn't just a notebook anymore. It was a timeline, a blueprint, and he had a feeling he'd need it soon. But Malik didn't yet know that the story was no longer his alone. At 8:12 a.m., just before the first bell, the video hit Snapchat. It was only 11 seconds long, shot from an angle low behind a desk. The footage was a little shaky, but it was unmistakable. Miss Cranley snatched Malik's backpack without warning and threw it toward the hallway. Her words, though barely above a whisper, were clear in the recording. Maybe next time you'll remember you're not special. By 8:39 a.m., the video had been shared to Instagram. By 9:05 a.m., it hit 12,000 views. And by 10:30, every corner of the school buzzed with it. Students played it on loop. Some shocked, some gleeful at the rare glimpse of a teacher slipping. Others watched with quiet recognition, because they'd seen it before, just never recorded. But while the video made its rounds in the hallways, something entirely different was happening behind the closed doors of the administrative offices. Principal Halverson's tie was loosened by half an inch, his hands trembling slightly as he paced in his office. The blinds were drawn. A monitor on his desk showed the video's frozen thumbnail. Malik's backpack midair, he muttered under his breath. Not now. Not this year. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Halverson, the student's here. He pressed the button. Send him in. Malik stepped into the office with his shoulders squared, but eyes wary. This was not his first visit to the principal's office, but it was the first one where he wasn't sure what crime he was being accused of. Close the door, Halverson said, motioning stiffly. Malik did. The silence in the room felt like it weighed twice as much as it did in class. Halverson gestured toward the seat across from his desk. Malik sat but didn't relax. So, the principal began, fingers tapping against the armrest. I suppose you've seen what's circulating. Malik held his stare. If you mean the video, yeah. Halverson nodded slowly. It's unhelpful. Malik blinked. Unhelpful. I understand, Halverson said quickly, raising a hand as if preempting a reaction. It was a moment. A bad one. But sometimes videos don't tell the full story. Context can be misleading. Malik's voice was even. She threw my bag. Halverson offered a tight smile. Yes, and she's being spoken to about that. But here's where it gets complicated. If this video continues spreading, and your name is attached to it, there could be consequences. Malik stiffened. For her? No, Halvorson said sharply. For you. The words hit like a slap. We're already getting calls from parents. We're doing damage control, he continued. People think this video is about racism, that it's some kind of proof. But allegations like that, they're serious. And they can hurt your record. Malik's hands curled into fists on his lap. So I'm the problem. I'm saying, Halvorson said carefully, that the smartest thing you could do right now is take the video down, or ask whoever posted it to remove it. If this becomes a disciplinary issue, defamation, violation of school policy, it could mean suspension. Malik stared at him in disbelief. You're threatening me for being the one humiliated. No one's threatening anyone. Yes, you are, Malik said, his voice low. You just said I could get suspended if I don't erase what she did. Halvorson leaned back. I'm trying to protect everyone here, including you. Then why wasn't she suspended? The principal exhaled. Malik, this isn't the hill you want to die on. For a moment, the room was dead silent. Then Malik reached into his bag and pulled out the journal. He didn't hand it over. He just placed it gently on his lap. This hill already has my name on it, he said. You just didn't notice until it went viral. Halvorson's smile faltered. You think you're the first student to bring me a notebook? I think I might be the first one with a camera on my side, Malik said. The air between them grew tense. Halvorson stood, adjusted his tie. Think carefully before you escalate this. We can still resolve this quietly. Malik stood too. He looked the man directly in the eye. I'm not the one who made it loud. As he left the office, his chest tight with rage and disbelief, Malik felt two things at once: fear for what would come next, and clarity. He realized something chilling. The system wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as it was designed. Not to protect students like him, but to shield teachers like her. As he walked past the guidance office, he overheard snippets of conversations. Staff huddled, voices hushed. A counselor whispered, "If this hits the district board," someone else muttered, "We need to talk to legal." Malik kept walking. When he reached the end of the hallway, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Jordan. Jordan, dude, check Twitter, now. Malik's stomach turned. He opened the app. There it was. The video, now clipped with subtitles and hashtags. Black students matter. Not special Maya. Suspend Cranley. And the views? Over 8. But one retweet stood out. From a verified account, Nadia Hart, a black journalist known for covering racial bias in schools. Her caption, "We've seen this story before, but we're not staying quiet this time. If anyone knows this student, DM me. I want to talk." Malik's mouth went dry. He felt like the world had shifted under his feet. Just 24 hours ago, he was invisible in a classroom. Now, his name was echoing through a national conversation. But the school wasn't done. By 2:15 p.m., Malik was called into a second meeting, this time not just with Halvorson, but with Miss Shaw, the district liaison. She wore a blazer and a practiced smile. "Malik," she said warmly, "we just want to make sure you feel safe and heard." Malik sat down, his instincts flaring. "Do you?" Miss Shaw folded her hands. "We're considering offering you a mediation session with Miss Cranley. A chance to clear the air, privately." Malik's voice was flat. "I don't want private. I want truth." Shaw didn't blink. "Sometimes, Malik, it's better to resolve things internally rather than letting them escalate." Malik thought about the word. Escalate. Funny how that was always what they said when a black kid pushed back. It was always about de-escalation, never accountability. He stood, again. This time slower. Controlled. "If you think this is going away," he said calmly, "you're not listening." He left without waiting for a response. But as he stepped into the courtyard, his phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. He opened the message. It was just a single screenshot, a list of school policy violations. His name was highlighted. At the bottom, a note, "Building a pattern of behavior. Be ready." His breath caught. Somebody was watching him, and they were documenting him just like he documented them. Malik made a decision in that office that would change everything. And it began with refusing to play quiet, even if it meant going to war with the very people who were supposed to protect him. By the time Malik walked through the front door that evening, the weight of the day had wrapped itself around his shoulders like a lead coat. His mother, Latasha, took one look at him, and her face changed. She didn't ask what happened. She just said, "Where's your father?" Malik pointed toward the den. Tyrone Trenum sat in his usual armchair, glasses low on his nose, the blue glow of his laptop flickering against the darkness. The moment he heard his son's footsteps, he paused, raised his head, and saw the journal Malik was gripping like a lifeline. No words were needed. Tyrone slowly closed the laptop lid, removed his glasses, and motioned for Malik to sit. The room filled with quiet, the only sound the faint ticking of a clock on the far wall. Malik opened the journal. He didn't speak at first. He simply turned the pages, one by one. His father leaned forward, eyes scanning each entry. Every locker search, every detention, every word coded to sound neutral, but feel like venom. Tyrone didn't flinch, but Malik saw his jaw tighten. Then Malik handed him the folded printout, the email from Cranley, the forwarded warning. Tyrone read it once. Then again. His expression never changed. But the air in the room thickened. Finally, he asked, calmly, "Do you know who sent you this?" Malik shook his head. Tyrone folded the email carefully, slipped it back into the journal, and said only one word. "Okay." Latasha entered then, her voice sharp with worry.
Okay?
"That's all you've got? Your son just handed you proof they're trying to ruin him, and you're—" Tyrone stood. "I said it's okay. That means I'm handling it." She fell quiet, but her eyes burned. The next morning, Tyrone arrived at the school just after 8 a.m. Before the first bell. He didn't dress like most parents. No jeans, no weekend casual. He wore a tailored navy suit, deep brown shoes polished sharp, and a silver pin on his lapel. A folded American flag. His military service spoke before he even opened his mouth. In one hand, he carried a worn leather briefcase. In the other, a white folder marked with post-it tabs and yellow highlights. When he entered the front office, the receptionist smiled politely and asked if he had an appointment. "No," Tyrone replied evenly, "but I believe Principal Halverson will want to see me." She hesitated. "Is this regarding a student?" "Yes," Tyrone said, stepping closer. "My son, Malik Trenum. You've probably heard of him by now." The receptionist's face changed. "Please have a seat." 5 minutes later, Halverson appeared. His smile was tight, and his hands fiddled with the button on his sleeve. "Mr. Trenum, what a surprise." Tyrone shook his hand firmly. "Not a pleasant one, I'm sure." Halverson gestured toward his office. "Let's talk." Once inside, Tyrone didn't wait for small talk. He placed the white folder neatly on the desk. "In this folder," he said, "you'll find over 20 documented instances of racial targeting against my son, by name and date. You'll also find cross-reference disciplinary records from the same period showing a clear disparity in how black male students are treated at this school versus their white peers." Halverson opened his mouth, but Tyrone raised a hand. "I'm not here for excuses. I'm not here to talk it out. I'm here to make something very clear." He leaned forward. "You're not just messing with my son. You're messing with every black child in this district." Halverson shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Trenum, with all due respect." "No, with all due respect, you've had plenty of time to address this. My son has come home in silence, in shame, every time you looked the other way. That ends today." Tyrone opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of printed emails. Ones Malik hadn't seen, ones Tyrone had requested through legal channels, the night before. Internal communication between staff, flagged by keywords like defiance, urban, attitude. The racial bias wasn't subtle. It bled through every sentence. Halverson paled as he read. "How did you—" "Doesn't matter," Tyrone said. "What matters is that I'm requesting a formal investigation into not only Miss Cranley's behavior, but the cultural environment of this entire school." Halverson swallowed. This could be escalated. "It already is," Tyrone said. "I've spoken to local media. I've spoken to 3 attorneys. I've spoken to every parent in Malik's friend group. We are prepared to file if need be." He stood. "You have 24 hours to schedule a meeting with the school board. I expect full transparency, documentation, and your cooperation." Halverson didn't speak. Tyrone buttoned his jacket. "Thank you for your time." As he left the office, Tyrone passed by Miss Cranley in the hallway. She was mid-stride, coffee cup in hand. When she saw him, her eyes narrowed, her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Tyrone stopped. "Miss Cranley," he said coolly, "I'm the father of the boy you tried to break. You might want to start checking your email." Her lips parted, but no words came out. He walked on. That afternoon, the school buzzed with whispers. Students shared screenshots of the video, speculations about Malik's dad, and memes mocking the school's silence. A few bold students taped signs to their lockers.
Malik matters.
We saw what you did. Not pugial. Just tired. But not everyone was cheering. At 6:42 p.m., as Tyrone prepared notes for a Zoom call with the district equity board, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He answered.
Silence.
Hello? The silence broke. A voice, distorted and low, whispered, "Drop it. Before your son ends up like the others." Click. Tyrone stared at the phone. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear but fury. He called the number back. Disconnected. He didn't tell Latasha. Not yet. He didn't want her to panic. Instead, he pulled up an encrypted drive on his computer and uploaded every document, every file. Then he added one more folder. Voicemail thread. He wasn't dropping anything. The next morning, as he approached the school again, he noticed something strange. His car, usually parked 2 blocks away, had been keyed, deep, angry. The scratch marks weren't random. They spelled out one word: liar. Tyrone stood in front of it for several seconds, took a photo, then walked into the school, without a word. When he reached the front office, he noticed the receptionist avoided his eyes. She gestured for him to wait. A few minutes later, a security officer appeared. "Mr. Trenham," he said, stiff. "The superintendent has requested your presence at district headquarters. Transportation's been arranged." Tyrone narrowed his eyes. "Why not tell me directly?" The man didn't answer. Just gestured toward a waiting SUV, outside. Tyrone gathered his briefcase and walked out. As the car pulled away from the curb, he stared out the tinted window. Something felt off. He didn't know if it was the voicemail, the car, the sudden meeting, or all of it together. But when the SUV pulled into the district building's underground garage, the driver didn't park near the elevators. He parked by a side door unmarked, with no windows. Tyrone turned. "Is this the main entrance?" The driver didn't respond. Tyrone's hand instinctively went to his phone, but the signal had dropped. Then the driver turned slightly, just enough for Tyrone to see the badge clipped to his belt. It wasn't district staff. It was private security, and Tyrone suddenly realized. Just as Tyrone started making waves, someone had decided it was time to silence him, and this meeting wasn't about resolution. It was about control. By the time Tyrone returned home from the district headquarters, it was after midnight. His shoulders carried more than exhaustion. They carried the quiet, unshakable weight of targeted resistance. The meeting had been a farce. 2 men in suits and a woman with a clipboard had greeted him, not with concern, but with controlled civility. They'd thanked him for his passion, offered vague reassurances about process, and danced around every demand he'd made. There was no investigation launched, no timetable given, just a polite threat wrapped in policy. "You may want to consider the long-term impact of this kind of attention." And then came the twist. As he exited the building, his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was a headline. Tyrone Trenham, ex-Marine turned activist, or former brawler with a hidden agenda. Below it, a blurry mugshot from 15 years ago, a bar fight in 2010, one that resulted in a dropped charge and a sealed record. The kind of incident that should have been long forgotten. Tyrone's heart dropped. The article made no mention of the racist threats he'd received. No mention of Malik, just carefully worded accusations. Phrases like questionable temperament and history of confrontation. They even misquoted a speech he gave at a local equity summit. The smear campaign had begun. By the next morning, social media was swarming. Anonymous accounts posted photos of Tyrone at protests. A blog claimed he once threatened a teacher. None of it verified, but all of it poisonous. At school, Malik heard whispers. "I heard his dad's violent. Didn't he get arrested?" Maybe Malik's just like him. Malik kept his head down, but the shame pressed on him like a hand to his throat. He didn't care about the stories. He cared that no one asked if they were true. Latasha was livid. "They're trying to bury us in lies before we even get to court." But Denise? Denise got quiet. Malik's cousin wasn't the type to explode. She was the type to dig. A 27-year-old black woman with a master's degree in data science and zero tolerance for institutional gaslighting. Denise had spent years designing systems for healthcare equity tracking. She knew how to follow digital trails, how to cross-reference timelines, and most importantly, how to get into databases the district didn't want anyone reading. She sat on the floor of her studio apartment that evening, her laptop open, headphones around her neck, and 3 empty coffee mugs within arm's reach. What they did to Uncle Tyrone, she said over the phone to Malik. That's strategic. That means they're scared. Denise had pulled up the district's publicly available data, employee complaint filings, and teacher tenure records. Most of it was bland, but patterns started forming. Teachers with long histories of student complaints had been internally reviewed, but never disciplined. The names of the students, mostly black. The language of the reports, almost identical. She narrowed her search. Cranley Sherry. Ian Pelline. Since the file was thin. Too thin. No complaints visible. No HR notes. No parent concerns. Denise leaned back. No way. She tried accessing archived board meeting minutes. The data was clunky, formatted badly. She sorted by terms like disciplinary review, an internal review process. That's when she found it. A 2014 entry. Redacted. The line read, employees in 4073. Parent raised concerns over classroom discrimination. No public action taken. The number matched Ms. Cranley's employee ID. Denise's hands flew over the keys. She found another from 2016. Then 2018. None public. None followed up. All referencing disciplinary tone, cultural conflict, or student discomfort. All closed, without action. The names of the students weren't listed in the summaries, but that didn't stop her. She switched to forums, local parent boards, Reddit threads, Facebook groups from the district's old community pages. And that's when the stories came flooding in. One parent described a teacher who humiliated her son for his speech and called him aggressive. Another said their daughter was marked tardy 10 times for being slow to respond. Another mentioned a student being suspended for sassing the teacher after asking if they could use the bathroom. The teacher was never named, but the description. Always a white woman. Always in history class. Always at Oak Ridge Middle. It was her. It had to be. Denise's stomach twisted. She opened a spreadsheet and began compiling it all. Incident descriptions, year, likely student demographic, outcome. By 1 a.m. she had 27 incidents dating back a decade, all with similar language, all leading nowhere, and none of it had been investigated. She leaned back, stunned. They've been burying her mess for years. She sent the file to Malik, Tyrone, and Latasha. The subject line read, "They forgot we know how to read." Tyrone called instantly. "Where did you get all this?" "I didn't break in," Denise replied. "I just read what was already there." Latasha's voice was shaking. "They've been doing this to our kids for over a decade. And they get away with it, because nobody fights back." Malik was quiet on the call. Then he said, "Can we use this?" Tyrone answered first. "Oh, we're not just using it. We're printing it, binding it, and dropping it on every board member's desk." Denise nodded slowly. "Good, because that wasn't all I found." She hesitated. Her screen glowed with a file, one she hadn't opened yet. It had appeared buried inside an old internal database backup she accessed through a cached school board link. It was labeled in all caps, "Do not open, Cran." It wasn't formatted like the other entries. It had no summary, just an attachment. Denise clicked it. The screen loaded slowly. Her eyes scanned. It wasn't a complaint. It was a letter from a parent, dated August. She began reading. "To whom it may concern, my son Jamari Ellis has been expelled after being accused by Ms. Cranley of making threats in class. We were not allowed to review evidence. There were no witnesses. My son has never been in trouble before. He is 12 years old. I believe this is racial targeting." The letter went on for 2 pages. The mother had begged the board to reconsider. She wrote about Jamari's dreams of joining the school's robotics team, his quiet nature, his love of books, how the incident crushed his confidence, how they'd tried to appeal and were ignored. And then, at the bottom, a typed note in red from a district administrator. "Sensitive file. Suppress from public dashboard. Close case." Denise covered her mouth. She read it again and again. It wasn't just buried. It was hidden on purpose. She picked up her phone, voice cracking. "Uncle Tyrone, I found something. A kid. A case they sealed." He didn't speak. She continued. "His name was Jamari Ellis." And then Denise found one file that had been marked "Do Not Open." And it wasn't just about misconduct. It was about a boy no one had heard from in over a decade. and a pattern darker than any of them imagined. The silence in Denise's apartment was deafening. The cursor blinked on the screen, taunting her. Jamari Ellis. A name no one had spoken in over a decade. A boy who, according to the file buried deep in a suppressed district archive, had once been in 7th grade. Accused, expelled, forgotten. Denise's fingers hovered above the keyboard, unsure where to begin. The more she reread the letter, the more her chest tightened. A parent had begged for justice in 2011, and someone at the district had buried it. Not dismissed, not reviewed, buried. Sensitive file. Suppress from public dashboard. She copied the name into a separate document. Then opened 5 browser tabs and began searching. Google. Social media. Mugshot databases. Employment. Lookups. Nothing came up right away. She searched his name with different spellings. Still nothing. Then she remembered something her job had taught her. People who vanish usually leave fragments behind. You just have to know where to look. She tried searching through youth services. A hit. Jamari Ellis, age 12, had been enrolled in Oak Ridge Middle School in 2011. Expelled October 6. 2 weeks later, a record from a juvenile detention center showed an intake under the same name. Her stomach dropped. She kept going. Cross-referenced his name with the local court records. Jamari Ellis appeared again in 2015, trespassing. Then in 2016, resisting arrest. Again in 2019, a missed court date. She traced every year like breadcrumbs leading from a child's destroyed future. By the time Denise leaned back in her chair, eyes blurry and heart racing, she knew 2 things. Miss Cranley's pattern didn't start with Malik. Jamari Ellis had never stood a chance. She picked up her phone and called Tyrone. I found him. He's still in Charlotte, lives in a converted motel off Wilkinson Boulevard. Tyrone's voice came through tight and sharp. Is he okay? I don't know, Denise said honestly, but I think we need to talk to him. He might be the missing link. Tyrone agreed. Send me the address. The next morning, Malik sat in the back seat of his father's SUV, journal on his lap, watching the city blur past through the window. Why are we doing this? He asked. Because this isn't just about you, Tyrone said. It never was. They pulled up to a faded motel painted the color of dust. The sign read Staylight Suites. Half the windows were covered in towels instead of curtains. The parking lot was cracked with weeds poking through. Room 11. Tyrone knocked. Silence. He knocked again. Then the door creaked open. A man stepped halfway into the light. He looked maybe mid-20s, but his eyes were older, tired, suspicious. Jamari Ellis. He wore a wrinkled t-shirt, 1 sock, and a guarded expression. Who are you? My name's Tyrone Trenham. Tyrone said gently. This is my son, Malik. We're not here to sell anything. We're here because we found your name in a file the school tried to hide. Jamari didn't respond. Tyrone tried again. It was about Ms. Cranley, and what happened in Jamari's entire body tensed. That name, he muttered. I haven't heard it in years. We think what happened to you is happening again, Tyrone said. We just need 5 minutes of your story. That's all. Jamari hesitated, then stepped aside. Come in. The room smelled faintly of mildew and microwave noodles. A duffel bag sat on the bed. A cracked TV screen leaned against the wall. Malik sat in the corner, clutching his journal. He didn't speak. He just watched. Jamari sank into the edge of the bed and rubbed his hands together. You said a file? Tyrone nodded. It said you threatened her, that you were expelled. But there was no evidence, no hearing, just removed. Jamari let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, that's how it started. He paused. I told her I didn't understand the assignment. She said I was being hostile. Next thing I know, I'm in the principal's office. They said I made a threat. I didn't even know what they were talking about. I kept saying I didn't do anything. His eyes watered, but he blinked it away. My mom fought like hell, wrote letters, called everybody. They didn't care. They told her if we didn't back off, it'd go on my permanent record. I was 12. The room fell into a heavy silence. Jamari stared at his hands. After that I stopped trying. Dropped out 2 years later. Got arrested stealing cough syrup. Every time I tried to do something right, that label followed me. Problem student. Aggressive. Uncooperative. I'm not stupid. I know what that meant. Tyrone looked at Malik. You're not alone, son. Jamari stood and went to the drawer. He pulled out a worn photo, A school portrait from 2011. He was smiling. Clean polo shirt. Eyes full of hope. She took that from me, he whispered. Tyrone reached into his folder and pulled out a copy of Denise's research. The spreadsheet, the files, the patterns. We think there are more, he said. More students, more names. If you're willing to go on record, you could help expose this. Jamari looked down. No one ever believed me. Malik finally spoke. They didn't believe me either. Not until the video. Jamari glanced up. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. An understanding. Jamari gave a slow nod. I'll do it. Whatever you need. Back at Denise's apartment, she added Jamari's name to the timeline. Tayson 1. 2011. A chain reaction. And then, just as she was saving the file, she noticed something strange in one of the district's archived spreadsheets. Another redacted line. Dated 2013. It had no name, no teacher listed, just a student number, and one line of comment. Recommended early removal. Matches prior behavior pattern. Refer to Ellis case. Denise zoomed in. The student number didn't match Jamari. It was someone else. A second student. A second buried case. She copied the number and ran it through the student ID registry. The name appeared. A girl. Kira Long. Expelled in 8th grade. She'd never heard of her. Denise's breath caught. She picked up her phone and texted Tyrone. There's another one. Malik's case was about to become part of a much bigger pattern. One with names they hadn't even found yet. And each file told a story the district had fought to erase. The pressure had become too loud to ignore. By the end of the week, the video of Malik's humiliation had surpassed 300,000 views. A growing thread on X, once a string of angry posts from students and parents, had turned into a citywide digital petition. Investigate Cranley. Activists were tagging the school board, the mayor, and the Department of Education. Every hour brought new screenshots, old stories, fresh receipts. Still, for 3 days, the district stayed silent. Then on a rainy Thursday morning, the official email arrived. It hit inboxes at 6:02 a.m. Just early enough to avoid the primetime news cycle, just late enough to count as public accountability. The subject line read, Statement from Superintendent Linda Scholes regarding recent events. Denise read it first. She sat upright in bed, blinking against the dull glow of her phone screen. This statement was 3 paragraphs long. Vague, sanitized, written like it had passed through 5 legal teams before release. It opened with a deflection. We are aware of the recent circulation of a video involving a classroom incident at Oak Ridge Middle School. While we understand that emotions are high, we ask our community to allow our internal processes to continue uninterrupted. It continued with empty language. The district remains committed to equity, fairness, and the educational success of all students, regardless of background. And then, the closing line, sharp, surgical. We apologize if anyone felt offended or uncomfortable by recent events. Denise whispered under her breath. Felt offended? No mention of Malik. No mention of Miss Cranley. No mention of the years of buried cases. Just soft-pedaled language and plausible deniability. Tyrone read it 10 minutes later and slammed his laptop shut. Latasha stared at the statement on her phone. Her jaw clenched so tight it trembled. Malik said nothing. He just handed his father the printed copy of the superintendent's email and returned to his room. He was done waiting for adults to do the right thing. By noon, the statement had backfired spectacularly. Screenshots of it flooded social media, circled in red ink, mocked and dissected. Influencers reposted it with the caption, "This is why they think they can get away with it." Even local news anchors criticized the non-response during their midday segment. One anchor looked directly at the camera and said, "If this is what leadership looks like, the students deserve better." That night, the Trenum family made a decision. "We're done talking to them behind doors," Tyrone said, pacing their living room. "If they won't hear us in silence, they're going to hear us in public." Denise leaned forward. Town hall. Atasha hesitated. "Will people come?" Tyrone looked at Malik. "If we show them this isn't just about him, they'll come." 2 days later, they rented out the Eastview Community Center. A modest hall, with metal chairs, a flickering projector screen, and walls painted a tired beige. Malik helped tape flyers to the front door. Denise organized the registration table. Tyrone brought the printed files, Jamari's case, Kira Long's ID, the list of 27 incidents Denise had uncovered. Latasha stood by the door, hugging each person who entered like family. By 6 p.m., they expected maybe 40 people. By 6:20, the room held over 2 folding chairs filled. People stood against the walls. Students, parents, grandparents, teachers, pastors, coaches. Some came clutching printouts. Others brought manila folders, legal pads, screenshots, emails, yearbooks. It wasn't just a town hall. It was a reckoning. Tyrone stepped up to the mic first. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He told the story, Malik's story. The journal, the video, the threats, the silence. And then he held up the folder with the words suppressed on the front. This, he said, is not one incident. This is not one teacher. This is a system. A quiet, polite, well-dressed system that teaches our children that they are problems long before they are ever treated like people. Murmurs swept the room. Nods. Closed eyes. A few tears. Then Denise took the stage. She brought numbers. Patterns. Evidence. She told them about Jamari, about Kira, about the buried documents, and the district's redactions. They didn't fail to act, she said. They chose not to. Then something unexpected happened. A woman in the back row, mid-40s, glasses, auburn hair, stood up. She wore a long beige coat, and her hands shook slightly as she raised them. "Can I speak?" she asked. Tyrone motioned for the mic. She approached slowly, eyes scanning the room as if searching for someone who might recognize her. "My name is Michelle Kerr," she said. "I used to teach math at Oak Ridge. I quit 2 years ago." The crowd stirred. She glanced at Denise. "Everything she's saying is true. I never saw the files, but I saw the patterns." Her voice cracked. "I taught 6th and 7th grade. I watched black boys get written up for things white students got excused for. I saw who got recommended for honors and who didn't. I saw who got labeled disruptive and who got called spirited." She hesitated, and I was told something once, in a staff meeting, something I've never repeated, until now. The room went completely still. Michelle Kerr gripped the microphone tighter. "A senior administrator told us, and I quote, 'Some of these kids only respond to fear. You have to show them early who's in charge.'" Gasps. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. Michelle blinked back tears. "That meeting changed me. I tried to speak up. They told me I was misinterpreting. They moved me to another grade. When I kept asking questions, they removed my mentorships. Isolated me. I left the next year." She looked at Malik. "I never said anything. And I'm sorry, but I'm not staying quiet now." Silence hung thick in the room. Then a wave of applause broke through. It wasn't loud. It was reverent. A release. A thank you. Malik sat frozen. He hadn't expected that. He didn't even know how to feel. Just a strange lightness in his chest. Like something long trapped had finally moved. Michelle turned to leave, but Tyrone stopped her. "Would you be willing to write that down? Or say it again on record?" She nodded. "Yes, I'll do whatever it takes." After that, more people stood. A parent who said her daughter was made to clean desks as punishment to teach humility. A former student who remembered being asked if his hoodie meant he was affiliated. Each story layered onto the last. Not identical, but connected. By the end of the night, Denise's list had doubled. As people began filtering out, hugging one another, wiping their eyes, someone tapped Malik on the shoulder. It was a boy around his age. Tall, skinny, nervous. He pulled a folded note from his pocket and handed it to Malik. "I didn't want to say it out loud," he whispered, "but she did the same thing to me." He didn't wait for a response. Just slipped out the side door. Malik opened the note. Inside, a single sentence. "They made me apologize to her, or else they'd suspend me," and a date. October. Malik handed the note to Tyrone, who stared at it for a long moment. Then the door opened again, and someone unexpected walked in. She wore a navy blouse and a security badge clipped to her belt. She looked nervous, but resolute. "My name is Nora Talbert," she said, her voice firm. "I work in the district's HR department." Denise froze. "I was told to destroy something," Nora said. 3 years ago. A folder. I didn't." She pulled an envelope from her coat. "It's not a copy," she said. "It's the original." She walked to the stage and handed it to Denise. Tyrone opened it carefully. Inside were pages stamped confidential. Emails. Handwritten notes. A photo. And one page that made Tyrone stop cold. A district official's handwritten note. Cranley too high profile. Let it die quietly. What she revealed into the microphone left the entire room speechless, and what was in that envelope could burn the entire district to the ground. The envelope Nora Talbert handed over still trembled in Tyrone's grasp. The community center had gone so quiet that even the hum of the overhead lights sounded like a drum. Denise, standing next to him, saw the words scrawled on the top page. Cranley too high profile. Let it die quietly, and felt her stomach drop. Tyrone slowly raised his head, meeting the gaze of every person still seated. Malik sat in the front row, journal clutched like a shield, his eyes darting from his father to the woman at the microphone. It was as if the whole room understood at once. This wasn't hearsay anymore. This was proof. But before Tyrone could say anything, another voice rose from the back. Steady, trembling only slightly. I have something to add. Heads turned. Mrs. Kerr was back. She hadn't left the hall after her first confession. She had been standing near the exit, gripping her coat, looking as though she might slip out unseen. But now she was walking toward the stage, her hands shaking, her eyes shining with something between fear and determination. She reached the microphone and took a long breath. My name is Michelle Kerr. Some of you may remember me as the 6th grade math teacher at Oak Ridge Middle. I taught here for 2 years before I resigned. Tonight I need to tell you why. The crowd stilled again. Phones rose discreetly. A few parents whispered, "Record this." Michelle swallowed hard. When I was hired, I was 29. Fresh from grad school. Idealistic. I believed in kids. All kids. I thought teaching was about unlocking potential. She gripped the podium tighter. But on my 3rd week, at a staff meeting, a senior administrator said something that rattled me. He said, and I remember it word for word, some of these urban kids only understand discipline. Don't waste your energy on the ones who are already lost. A collective murmur spread through the hall. I thought it was a one-off, Michelle continued. I told myself I misheard, but it didn't stop. I started noticing how the system worked, how certain names on the roster got red flags before the semester even began, how some students were marked at risk without ever being given a chance, how in department meetings, I was encouraged to be extra strict with certain students. Her voice cracked. Specifically black boys. Specifically the ones who asked questions, who spoke their minds, who didn't know their place. Gasps rose. Malik's mother pressed a hand to her mouth. Michelle kept going. I was told to write referrals faster, to grade harder, to recommend remedial classes for their own good. And when I pushed back, when I said this wasn't fair, my department chair said, if you don't do it, someone else will. She shook her head. It wasn't about teaching. It was about control. Silence rolled over the hall like a wave. I tried to make it right in my own classroom. Michelle said softly, I tried to protect the kids in front of me, but every time I did, I got written up. They took away my mentoring group. They pulled me from the curriculum committee. They told me my contract might not be renewed. I held on for 2 years. Then I quit. But I've carried the guilt ever since. I told myself maybe it was just me. But seeing Malik's story, seeing all of this, she gestured to Denise's spreadsheet, the envelope in Tyrone's hands, the crowd's faces. I can't stay silent anymore. Her eyes found Malik's. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I'm sorry you had to go through what you did. Malik felt a lump in his throat. He didn't know this woman, but he knew the truth in her eyes. The hall stayed quiet for a heartbeat longer. And then, from somewhere in the crowd, a voice rose. Small at first, then stronger. Protect our kids! Another joined in. Protect our kids. Soon the chant rolled like thunder, swelling until it filled the hall. Parents, students, teachers, everyone stood on their feet. Protect our kids. Protect our kids. Malik stood too. He felt something shift inside him, a swell of vindication mixed with anger and hope. For the first time, the shame he'd carried for weeks felt lighter. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It was everyone's. Tyrone stepped back to the mic, raising his hand for calm. The chant dimmed but didn't die completely. Thank you, Mrs. Kerr, he said, his voice steady. This is why we're here. This is why we're not going away. Michelle nodded, tears streaking her face. She stepped off the stage, and hands reached out to touch her shoulder as she passed. Parents whispering thank you as she moved. Denise took a deep breath, feeling the energy in the room shift. This was no longer a meeting. It was a movement. But then Tyrone's phone buzzed. He glanced down. An unknown number. He ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. 3 times in a row. Finally he answered, stepping aside. Hello? Silent. Then a voice, distorted and low, hissed. You're making a mistake. Tyrone's brow furrowed. Who is this? You think you're helping those kids, the voice said. But you're just putting a target on your family. Drop it. The line went dead. Tyrone stared at his phone. His knuckles whitened around it. He turned back toward the stage, his face composed but pale. Denise noticed immediately. What is it? She whispered. He shook his head. Later. Malik, still near the front, watched his father's expression change. A flicker of fear crossed his chest. He'd seen his dad angry, defiant, even wounded. He'd never seen him look hunted. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the hall, Nora Talbert, the HR staffer who had risked everything to hand over the envelope, slipped out quietly, her eyes darting as though she sensed she'd already crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Up on stage, Tyrone forced his voice steady. We are not done, he told the crowd. This is only the beginning. But Denise's phone buzzed next. She glanced at the screen. A text from an unknown number. You're next. She looked up, scanning the hall. She couldn't tell who had sent it. For a split second, the energy in the room flickered from triumph to unease. Parents shifted in their chairs. Students looked toward the exits. Malik felt it too. A ripple under his skin. He thought of the anonymous email in his journal. The threat slid under their door. His father's keyed car. He realized the fight they'd stepped into was bigger than they'd imagined, and darker. Mrs. Kerr had just confessed the unthinkable, and the town had rallied. But in the shadows, someone else was watching. Someone who didn't want these stories told. As the chant of "Protect Our Kid" echoed off the walls, Malik's phone buzzed with a new notification. A private message from an anonymous account containing a single line, "We know where you live." The chant from the town hall was still echoing in Malik's head hours after they left the community center. Protect our kid. It had felt like a shield around him, a sound so strong it almost drowned out the fear. Almost. By the time they got home, it was past midnight. Tyrone double-checked the locks. Denise stayed behind to upload new evidence to a secure cloud. Latasha paced the living room like a sentry, arms folded tight across her chest. Malik sat at the kitchen table with his journal open but blank, staring at the empty page as if daring it to fill itself.
I'm fine, he murmured when his mother tried to get him to go to bed. But she saw the tremor in his hands.
Sometime after 2 a.m., the house went still. The only light came from the street lamp seeping through the curtains. Malik had finally drifted into a shallow sleep on the couch when a soft sound stirred Latasha awake. A faint scuffing against the front door. She sat up, listening. Another sound. Paper sliding across wood. Her heart spiked. She moved quietly, barefoot on the cool tile, and peered through the peephole. No one. Just the night. When she opened the door, a single white envelope lay on the mat. No handwriting. No return address. She picked it up slowly, her fingers trembling. The paper felt too crisp, too deliberate. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper. One line, bold black letters. Drop it, or Malik will pay next. Latasha's knees nearly gave. She clutched the doorframe, her breath coming fast. Tyrone appeared behind her, his face darkening as he read the words. He took the note carefully, like it might burn. Malik stirred awake on the couch. What's going on? Latasha forced her voice calm. Nothing. Go back to sleep. But Malik's eyes had already caught the paper. He sat up. What is that? Tyrone hesitated. It's just someone trying to scare us. Let me see it, Malik said. No, Latasha snapped, but it was too late. Malik had already grabbed the note. His eyes scanned the words. His jaw clenched. This isn't just a threat, he said quietly. It's a warning. Tyrone called the police. 2 officers arrived 20 minutes later, yawning and polite but skeptical. They took a quick photo of the note, asked a few perfunctory questions, and left with a shrug. Probably a prank, one of them said. Kids these days. Latasha stared after them in disbelief. A prank? They know his name. They'll file a report, Tyrone muttered, closing the door. That's all. He turned to Malik. Tomorrow you're not going to school. Malik stiffened. What? You're staying home. At least until we figure this out. I can't just hide. Malik shot back. Latasha put a hand on his shoulder. Baby, this is bigger than you now. We need you safe. He pulled away gently. Safe where? They know where we live. No one had an answer. By morning, Latasha had made her decision. She contacted the district and arranged for Malik to be placed on an emergency online learning plan. Temporary, she told him, but her voice cracked. Just until this blows over. Malik sat at his desk later that day, staring at a screen full of login instructions. The walls of his room felt closer than they ever had before. It wasn't freedom. It was exile. He opened his journal. He started to write, but stopped. The words on the page blurred. He thought about Jamari Ellis, about Kira Long, about every name on Denise's spreadsheet. He thought about Mrs. Kerr's confession, about the chant that had filled the hall. And then he wrote something he'd never written before, scrawling it in big block letters across the next blank page. I'm not a problem. I'm a person. He underlined it twice. Later that night, while his parents whispered in the kitchen about security cameras and legal fees, Malik turned his journal into a letter. He wrote not to the school, not to the district, but to everyone. He wrote about how it felt to be watched, labeled dismissed, about the humiliation of having his bag thrown, about the nights he stayed up copying down every injustice so he wouldn't think he was imagining it. He wrote, I am not your stereotype. I am not your scapegoat. I am a student who wants to learn. And then, I'm not a problem. I'm a person. He ended with a plea, don't let them do this to anyone else. When he was done, he stared at the letter. His hands trembled, but not from fear, from something else, something closer to resolve. He snapped a photo of it with his phone, opened his social media app, and posted it. No caption, just the letter. Within minutes it began to spread. First his classmates, then their parents, then strangers. Screenshots with the hashtag I'm not a problem appeared on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. By noon, the letter had 40,000 shares. By evening, over 200,000 comments flooded in. Teachers apologizing, parents confessing similar stories, students from other districts adding their own experiences. Malik sat on his bed, watching the numbers climb. It felt surreal, like his words were walking out into the world without him. Latasha entered quietly, holding her phone. Her eyes were wet. Did you post this? Yes, Malik said. She sat next to him, reading the letter silently. When she finished, she exhaled shakily. This is brave. It's the truth, Malik said. She put her arm around him. You're still my baby, and they're still dangerous. Tyrone appeared in the doorway. It's already on the news. Malik looked up. What? Tyrone held out his phone. A local news anchor was reading excerpts of Malik's letter live on air. His words scrolled across the screen in bold font. I'm not a problem. I'm a person. The anchor finished with, this student's plea has struck a chord across the state. Malik stared at the screen. He'd never imagined his private words would be read on TV. He felt exposed but also seen. But with the visibility came a new kind of unease. As the family sat together in the living room, the house felt different. The windows darker. Every sound louder. Denise called from her apartment. It's everywhere, she said. Your letter's trending. But Malik? What? He asked. There are trolls. Anonymous accounts. They're already trying to discredit you. Some are saying you made up the note. Others are digging into your dad again. It's coordinated. Malik's heart sank. Of course they are. Denise hesitated. And there's something else. A DM just came to my inbox. No name. No photo. It just said, tell them to stop, or we'll make sure the boy learns his place. Latasha closed her eyes, gripping Malik's hand. Tyrone's jaw clenched. We're not stopping. No, Malik said quietly. We're not. He looked at his phone. Notifications kept pouring in. One stood out. A message from a verified account he didn't recognize. He opened it. It was short, direct. I read your letter. Call me. Nan. Malik blinked. Who's Nan H? Tyrone leaned over. When he saw the name attached to the profile, his eyes widened. It was Nadia Hart, the black journalist with over 1 million followers who had retweeted the video weeks earlier. She's the one who took down the police department in Raleigh last year, Denise said over speakerphone. She's huge. Malik stared at the message. He hadn't tagged her. He hadn't sent it to her. Yet somehow she'd found him. She wants to talk, he said, half to himself. Latasha squeezed his shoulder. Baby, you're about to go national. The letter had reached someone no one expected, and her next move would drag Malik's fight out of their living room and into the national spotlight. The morning after Malik's letter went viral, the house phone rang before dawn. Latasha reached it first. bleary-eyed, her voice still thick from sleep. Hello? A pause. Hi, this is Eva Rourke. I'm a senior producer with CNN. We read your son's letter. Latasha sat upright. You're calling from CNN? Yes, Eva replied gently. We'd like to speak with Malik. We think this story matters. Within an hour, the house was buzzing. Tyrone printed out Malik's letter and highlighted every line the media had quoted. Denise started organizing files into a shared drive in case CNN requested documents. Malik sat on the couch, numb but awake, phone in hand, refreshing notifications like they were a lifeline. He wasn't just being seen, he was being heard. The call came at 10:43 a.m. Eva's voice was warm but efficient. She introduced herself, asked Malik if he was comfortable going on camera, and promised their segment would focus on his words, not just the drama surrounding them. I'm not interested in clickbait, she said. I want people to feel your story. You up for that? Malik hesitated. Yes, he said, but only if I can tell the truth. You tell it, Eva answered. We'll air it. The interview was scheduled the same day. Via Zoom, a local CNN crew showed up at the house with lights and cameras. They transformed the dining room into a miniature studio. Malik wore a simple button-down shirt. His mother sat just off screen, hand on her chest the entire time. The questions were direct, but respectful. How did it feel in that moment, when your bag was thrown? What went through your mind as the school asked you to stay quiet? And then the question that made Malik pause. What do you want the country to understand? Malik looked into the camera, eyes steady. I want them to understand that this isn't about one teacher. It's about a system. A system that teaches us to sit down, shut up, and smile while we're being erased. And if we speak up, we're punished, or labeled, or silent. He didn't blink. I'm not speaking up because I want attention. I'm speaking up because I'm tired of watching kids who look like me get broken before they even get a chance. When the interview aired that night, it played during CNN's primetime segment under the headline, Malik Trenham's Stand, the fight for justice in America's classrooms. Malik's face filled millions of screens across the country. And with it came a flood. Messages from students in Atlanta, Detroit, Oakland, Chicago. Stories about quiet humiliations, about extra scrutiny, about discipline that didn't feel fair. Parents shared their children's experiences. Teachers, some anonymous, some bold, confirmed the patterns. The hashtag, I'm not a problem, turned into a movement. Educators held after-school forums. Students organized walkouts. One school even hosted a virtual reading of Malik's letter as part of their anti-bias week. But back in Oak Ridge, nothing changed. The school released a second statement, colder than the first. They confirmed Miss Cranley had been placed on administrative leave with pay. The district claimed they were reviewing internal procedures and evaluating professional conduct. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the mounting evidence, no mention of the growing national attention. Malik read the statement 3 times, each word colder than the last. Still paid, he whispered. Still protected. Denise slammed her laptop shut. They're betting the news cycle will move on. Latasha shook her head. Not this time. Tyrone leaned forward. They're treating this like PR. We need to treat it like war. Malik felt it too. The shift. The line had been crossed. But instead of accountability, the district was closing ranks. Choosing silence over justice. Procedure over people. The next day, Malik went back on air. Not CNN this time. An independent news outlet with a massive YouTube following. The setup was simpler, the host younger, but the questions hit harder. What do you think should happen to Miss Cranley? Malik took a breath. I think she should be held accountable. But more than that, I think the people who protected her should be too. He paused. I think this whole district needs to answer for what it's been hiding. The host leaned in. Are you scared? Malik looked straight at the camera. Yeah, but I'm more scared of what happens if I stay quiet. When the interview ended, Malik sat back in his chair, heart pounding. For a moment, he wondered if he had gone too far. But then he checked his inbox. Hundreds of new messages. Not hate this time. Hope. From an education major in Vermont. Your courage just changed my thesis. From a school board member in New Jersey. We've opened an investigation in our own district after reading your story. From a 5th grade teacher in Mississippi. I'm using your letter in my class tomorrow. The walls that once felt so close were now full of voices. Joining his. But the power of visibility came with risk. That night, around 2 a.m., Denise's phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. When she answered, The voice was calm. Too calm. You don't stop, the kid gets it next. Click. She froze. She called Tyrone, her words tumbling out. By 3 a.m., the family was gathered in their living room again. Tired, angry, and still unmoving. We call the police, Latasha said. They won't do anything, Malik replied. Tyrone nodded. We still document it, but we don't stop. Malik stood, walked to the window, and looked outside. The street was quiet. Still, but he felt watched. At 7:16 a.m., they got the call from the school janitor. Someone had vandalized Oak Ridge Middle overnight. Spray painted in red across the front of the building, over the glass entryway, were 5 words. Do you see us now? The school board called it an act of criminal mischief. The principal called it counterproductive. Malik? He called it a message. Tyrone drove him past the school that morning. Police tape fluttered. The media crowded the sidewalk. Students gathered in clumps, pointing, whispering. Malik stared out the window, expression unreadable. Latasha's voice was quiet. Do you think this was about you? No, Malik said. I think it was about all of us. Denise called from the back seat. It's trending already. Tyrone nodded. Let them try to hide now. But as the family circled the school one more time, a news van pulled up fast. No logo, no credentials on the crew. Just a camera and a mic. A man stepped out. Sharp suit. Dead eyes. He didn't approach. Just stood there filming Malik's face through the window. Tyrone pulled the car away. What was that? Malik asked. Not press, Denise muttered. That was surveillance. That night, someone vandalized the school, with a message. But while the nation watched in outrage, someone in power had quietly launched a counter-investigation into Malik's family. It happened sometime between midnight and morning. By the time the sun peeked over Oak Ridge Middle School's rooftop, the red letters were impossible to ignore. Do you see us now? The words stretched across the entire front wall of the school, sprayed in thick crimson strokes. Not sloppy, not rushed, deliberate. The type of message painted by someone who didn't just want to be heard. They wanted to be remembered. Police had already roped off the entrance when students began to arrive. Teachers were escorted through side doors. Maintenance staff huddled around the stain, whispering. Administrators stood in stiff clusters, pretending not to be rattled. Inside his car parked just down the street, Malik stared at the message. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Latasha gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Tyrone stood outside, hands in his pockets, sunglasses on, silently watching reporters swarm in waves. Malik finally asked, They really think this is gang-related? Tyrone nodded slowly. That's what the statement says. Malik let out a soft, bitter laugh. Spray paint 5 words in red, and suddenly we're dangerous. Not we, Denise added from the back seat. You. Specifically. She passed him her phone. The school's official press release had just gone live. In light of last night's vandalism, we are working with law enforcement to investigate what appears to be gang-affiliated imagery on school property. Gang-affiliated. That word echoed louder than all the others. Malik leaned forward, jaw clenched. They're trying to turn protest into threat. They always do, Tyrone muttered. Denise added, That message wasn't a crime, it was a confession. This system's been blind to us for too long. That morning, Malik didn't go inside. He stood across the street, watching other students walk past the police tape. Some looked at the letters and kept moving. Others paused, phone cameras raised, lips pressed together. Then one stopped. A girl with braids, maybe 13 or 14, turned to Malik and nodded once. Then another. Then 3 more. It didn't take long. By third period, 300 students had walked out. Some marched silently. Some chanted. A few held signs that read, We won't be erased. Stop calling us dangerous. Our schools. Our voices. And then, Malik appeared. Bullhorn in hand, journal in his back pocket, hoodie zipped halfway, not angry, just ready. He stood at the front of the group, looking out at his peers gathered in the parking lot. Phones pointed at him from all directions. Reporters lined the sidewalks. Police lingered just far enough away. He raised the bullhorn. My name is Malik Trenum. His voice rang through the lot, crisp and steady. I'm not a gang member. I'm not aggressive. I'm not a threat. He turned, pointing to the spray-painted letters behind him. They're calling that a crime. But for me, that was the first time the school ever acknowledged I existed. Students murmured. Some clapped. Others simply listened, eyes wide. He continued, "This isn't just about me. This is about every student who got written up for being loud when they were just passionate. Every student called lazy, for needing help. Every kid labeled a problem before they even had a chance to prove who they were." He looked out over the crowd. "We are not your mistakes. We are your future." The parking lot erupted. Students cheered. Teachers near the edge of the crowd clapped quietly, some looking over their shoulders to make sure they weren't being watched. Malik stepped back, the bullhorn lowered. For the first time since that bag hit the floor, he felt something he hadn't in weeks. Power. Real power. Not the kind that comes from authority, but the kind that comes from truth. Denise posted the speech online. Within hours it had over 600,000 views. But Oak Ridge's administration wasn't celebrating. Behind closed doors, they were spiraling. Superintendent Schulz held an emergency meeting with legal counsel, media reps, and a crisis consultant flown in from D.C. The message was clear: get ahead of this, or get buried by it. And so, 4 days after Malik's CNN interview, and only 1 day after the student walkout, the school district held its own press conference. The stage was simple: blue curtains, 2 flags, a podium. Superintendent Scholes spoke first. Robotic, defensive, legalese. Then came the surprise. Miss Cranley. She hadn't been seen in public since the incident. Her blonde hair was pulled tight into a bun, her blazer crisp, her smile forced. She stepped to the mic slowly, pausing before she spoke. "I want to begin by saying that I've been deeply troubled by how things have unfolded." Troubled. The word dropped like ice into the crowd. "I've dedicated 18 years of my life to teaching," she continued, "and never once have I acted out of malice or bias." Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters leaned in. She kept going. The video that was shared captured a single moment out of context. Malik was repeatedly disruptive. He refused to respect the classroom environment. "And I regret that emotions got the better of me." No apology. Only deflection. Only excuses. "I never saw him as less. I saw him as needing structure," she added. Denise watched the live stream from her laptop, fists clenched. Tyrone paced the room. "She's trying to rewrite the story," Latasha whispered. "She's throwing him under the bus." Again. Malik sat on the couch, stunned. His fingers trembled as he watched Miss Cranley's mouth shape the same kind of coded words he'd heard all his life. Disruptive. Structure. Out of context. She ended her speech with a line that made the room fall silent. "I am not racist. I am a victim of a smear campaign." And with that, she stepped back. The camera panned to Superintendent Scholes, who nodded once. No one corrected her. No one challenged her. No one asked about Jamari Ellis, or Kira Long, or the 27 complaints Denise had surfaced. The press conference ended, but the fallout had only begun. Malik didn't cry. He didn't yell. He stood up slowly, walked into his room, and closed the door. Inside, he opened his journal. He flipped past pages of pain, fear, and defiance. Then he wrote, "I watched the person who tried to erase me stand on stage and call herself the victim." He paused. "She said I needed structure. What I needed was someone to see me." That night, Malik's video response went live. He didn't speak through a bullhorn this time. Just his phone. Just his face. "Ms. Cranley said she's not racist," he began. "But racism isn't always loud. It isn't always slurs or shouting. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's discipline with a smile." He stared into the lens. "I didn't ruin her career. She did. I just told the truth." Then, "I'm not interested in her apology. I'm interested in the students she hurt before me." He ended with a question. "Do you see us now?" By morning, the video had over 1.2 million views. But not everyone was celebrating. That same morning, Denise received an encrypted email with a subject line that simply read "FOIA request. Rejected." Inside was a message from the district's legal team. Her formal request to access employee disciplinary records had been denied, retroactively. A footnote had been added to her digital file. Considered hostile data miner. She called Tyrone immediately. "They're shutting me out, and they just flagged my credentials." He didn't even hesitate. "They're scared." Good. But fear cuts both ways. That night, as Malik scrolled through his DMs, a new message appeared. No name. No picture. Just a PDF attachment titled, "The Ones You Missed." He opened it. Inside was a list of students. Not just from Oak Ridge, but from schools across the district, dozens, hundreds, each with a note next to their name. Removed for insubordination, transferred under threat of expulsion, targeted for reassignment. Malik scrolled, heart pounding. At the bottom, one final sentence. This isn't about a teacher, it's about a playbook. But what she said only made things worse, because now Malik had proof that this wasn't just a scandal. It was a district-wide operation. It was billed as an exclusive, a primetime sit-down with a local NBC affiliate. Dim lighting, warm tones, the host leaning forward like they were about to uncover something tragic and misunderstood. The teaser hit the airwaves with just 5 words and a still frame of Miss Cranley wiping her eyes. Her side of the story. When it aired that Thursday night, the town froze. Screens lit up in diners, in school lounges, in living rooms. Even Malik's household, despite their exhaustion, gathered around the TV. Latasha sat with her arms folded tight. Tyrone didn't blink once. Denise watched with her laptop open, waiting to cross-check every word. The segment opened with soft piano music, and a slow zoom on Ms. Cranley's face. She wore beige again, deliberate, gentle, approachable. Her hair was looser this time. She looked more like a guidance counselor than the woman who had tossed a child's backpack across a classroom. The interviewer asked, "What do you want people to know that they may have misunderstood about that day?" Miss Cranley's sigh was perfectly timed. "I want people to know I never meant to hurt anyone. I've dedicated my life to helping children." Her eyes misted. "But sometimes, teaching is hard. Sometimes, students come in," with she paused, as if choosing her words carefully, with attitudes, with chips on their shoulders. Malik felt his fists clench in his lap. She continued. "Malik had an energy. He often challenged me, gave me looks. There was a sense that he didn't see me as the authority figure in the room." The interviewer leaned in. "Did you feel unsafe?" That was it. That was the moment. Ms. Cranley nodded. "I did. Yes, I felt threatened." Latasha whispered, "Here it comes." "I wasn't aggressive," she said, tilting her head slightly. "I was defensive. Any teacher in my position would have acted similarly. It wasn't personal. It was classroom management." Tyrone's jaw was locked so tight, it twitched. The segment continued with soft transitions, clips of her in old classrooms, awards she'd received, letters from former students curated to paint her as a misunderstood veteran teacher being attacked by a viral storm. At the end, she looked directly into the camera and said, "I pray this community remembers who I've always been. Not one moment taken out of context." The anchor signed off. That was Cheryl Cranley, sharing her truth for the first time. In Malik's living room, silence fell like a blanket soaked in oil. Denise stood first. That was a rehearsal, not an interview. Latasha exhaled shakily. They let her say threatened. They let her say it. Tyrone picked up the remote, muted the screen, and turned to Malik. "Son," he said, "we're not letting that stand." Malik's face was stone. She looked the whole country in the eye, and told them I scared her. That I made her feel unsafe. "She weaponized your existence," Denise said softly. Classic playbook. Within the hour, the internet responded, but not the way Cranley hoped. Malik's classmates flooded social media with their own experiences. Screenshots of missed grades, ignored emails, backhanded comments. Students from years prior posted anonymous threads. "Cranley told me my hair was distracting. She said I was too defensive when I corrected her about the civil rights movement." A tag began trending on Twitter. We were there too. And then came the timeline receipts. One student dug into the school's internal portal, screenshotted multiple incident reports filed by Cranley, all against black male students. Another showed 3 emails Cranley sent to the principal, describing Malik as increasingly combative, sent weeks before the bag incident. It was clear now. She had been building a case before anything ever happened. Even Malik's quiz grades, ones he never challenged, were pulled up and compared. A student who sat next to him showed matching answers but a higher grade. Others began reviewing their old files. What emerged was undeniable. A pattern. One student tweeted. "She said she was scared, but the only one who was ever afraid was me." Denise compiled everything into a shared drive and labeled it the mask cracks. Reporters started reaching out again, this time with different tones. CNN called. MSNBC sent a crew. Even PBS asked for a sit-down interview. But Malik wasn't sure he wanted to do another one. "It feels like we're running in circles," he told his dad. "You're not," Tyrone said. You're pulling the curtain back, and people are seeing the machinery. But something else was about to hit, and no one saw it coming. At 11:09 p.m., Malik's phone buzzed. A private message request. No profile pic. Just a display name. Hidden in plain sight. The message read, "I have something you need to hear." Attached was an audio file labeled Cranley voicemail 2. Malik stared at it, unsure. He sent it to Denise. She scanned it with her software. No malware, no viruses, just a raw audio file. She clicked play. At first it was garbled, then clearer. The voice was unmistakable.
Miss Cranley.
Laughing, talking to someone on the phone. The voice on the other end was another teacher, male, mid-40s, unsure but amused. They were discussing a student. It wasn't Malik. The student's name was Julian, and Cranley said, laughing, "Oh, he's another one of those thinks he's untouchable because he's got TikTok followers." I reminded him real quick who's in charge. A pause. I marked him for disrespect and threw his phone in the trash. Let his mama come up here crying. I'll tell her the same thing I told that other one. The teacher asked, "Which one?" Cranley responded, "The mouthy one from a couple years ago. Jamari something. I had to get him out early." Another pause. "You just have to make them look angry in the report. That's all it takes." Silent. Then, once you say you feel threatened, they can't touch you. The audio ended. No one spoke. Denise sat frozen, her mouth open. Tyrone stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Latasha closed her eyes. Malik just whispered, "She's done this before." Tyrone said quietly, "She knows how to weaponize the system. She's been trained by it." Denise immediately uploaded the audio to a private YouTube link, timestamped every key phrase, then began reaching out to journalists with credentials. "This is it," she said. "This isn't just racism. This is manipulation, calculated, rehearsed." By morning, the audio was viral. News anchors played the clip with expressions of disbelief. "She admitted to altering behavior reports," one host said. "She laughed about it." The district scrambled. Legal advisors were put on emergency calls. Public statements promised further internal review. But the mask was off. Students printed transcripts of the voicemail and taped them to lockers. A new chant formed in protest lines. "You felt threatened, we felt erased." Cranley's defenders, few and dwindling, retreated. One parent pulled their child from her class permanently. Another teacher at Oak Ridge resigned in protest of administrative cowardice. Still, the district did not fire her. When asked why, their spokesperson replied, "Due process is ongoing. We must allow internal procedures to be respected." But outside the school gates, the community was done being patient. A new protest was called for Saturday. This time, not just students, teachers, parents, former students, and civil rights attorneys. Malik sat quietly in his room, phone in hand, watching the crowd count rise on the RSVP list. Over 1,200 people were confirmed. Latasha entered, holding a printed copy of the voicemail transcript. She sat beside him, placed it on his desk. "You know what this means, right?" Malik nodded. "Yeah, this isn't just about me anymore." Then a former student released a voicemail that changed the narrative and proved that Ms. Cranley's fear wasn't just a lie, it was a tactic she'd used before to destroy black futures. The clip was only 47 seconds long, but it detonated like a bomb. By sunrise, the voicemail was on every timeline, every news feed, every morning show chyron. The audio wasn't grainy. It wasn't ambiguous. It was crystal clear. Miss Cranley's voice, unmistakable, unguarded, and gleeful. "He thought he mattered." I reminded him he doesn't. A short laugh, then the scrape of a chair. On the other end, the male teacher chuckled nervously. Cranley's voice again, lower now but still audible. "They all think they're special until you break them early. That's the only way they learn." Click. Silence. For a moment the world held its breath. Then everything shifted. The clip was uploaded at 6:32 a.m. By 7 Azardin, it had over 1 million views. By 8 Azard, national anchors were playing it on loop, with captions. I reminded him he doesn't matter. MS Cranley in secret voicemail. Even those who had been hesitant to pick a side couldn't defend it now. The mask had cracked. The teacher who had stood at a podium claiming she felt threatened was now recorded mocking a child for believing he mattered. The backlash was immediate. Sponsors began pulling funding from Oak Ridge Middle's after-school programs. A local bank issued a statement. "Effective immediately, we are suspending our partnership with Oak Ridge until further notice." The city's largest corporate donor canceled their contract for the district's summer STEM initiative. District lawyers scrambled to control the firestorm. But every time they released a carefully worded statement about context, a new clip surfaced. Students sharing their stories, teachers hinting at a wider culture of coercion, screenshots of internal emails referencing discipline priorities. The district's PR machine was no match for the sheer volume of receipts. Malik didn't watch the news that morning. He sat at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal gone soggy, his journal open, but blank. Latasha hovered nearby, torn between pride and worry. Tyrone paced by the window, his phone vibrating non-stop with calls from journalists, lawyers and community leaders. Denise appeared in the doorway, holding up her laptop. "It's everywhere," she said softly. "She's done." Malik didn't look up. "She's not done. Not yet." Latasha crouched beside him. "Baby, this changes everything. People believe you now." "I didn't want them to believe me because she slipped up," Malik said quietly. "I wanted them to believe me because it was true." His voice was steady but heavy. Tyrone stopped pacing. "This isn't about belief anymore. It's about what happens next." He dropped a stack of papers onto the table. Legal filings, witness statements, evidence Denise had compiled. "I talked to the attorneys. They're ready to move. We file next week." Latasha inhaled sharply. "Are we sure?" Tyrone nodded. "We're sure." But Malik just stared at the papers. Court. Lawyers. Judges. He imagined himself on a witness stand, his every word dissected. He imagined Miss Cranley sitting across from him, still in her blazer, still wearing that same careful smile. "She's going to say, 'I ruined her life,'" he whispered. "She ruined her own life," Denise said firmly. "You're just showing the world how." That afternoon, Malik's phone buzzed with a DM from a stranger. It wasn't a threat this time. It was a message from a boy named Julian, the same name mentioned in Cranley's voicemail. "I'm the kid she talked about," Julian wrote. "She did it to me too." Attached was a scanned copy of his disciplinary record, an identical pattern of disruptive and combative notes, none substantiated, all signed by Cranley. Malik stared at the screen. Another life bent off course. He typed back, "Do you want to speak out?" Julian's reply was instant. "If you're going to court, I'll testify." Malik showed the message to his father. Tyrone exhaled slowly. "This is bigger than we thought." By evening, Cranley voicemail had become Cranley Playbook. Students from other schools across the district began sharing similar stories. A teacher anonymously posted a memo from 2017 instructing staff to maintain consistent discipline expectations for at-risk populations. It was written in corporate jargon but obvious in intent. The movement had evolved. It wasn't just about one teacher anymore. It was about a pattern, a manual, a system. Latasha scrolled through the flood of stories, tears slipping down her cheeks. "How many kids?" she whispered. Denise answered without looking up from her laptop. "Too many." But Malik didn't cry. He didn't rage. He didn't even smile at the news anchors calling him brave or courageous. He just wrote in his journal, "This isn't about revenge. This is about reform." He underlined it once, then again. That night, a CNN panel debated the case. One anchor said, "This isn't a scandal, it's a blueprint." Another replied, "If this district is doing it, how many others are?" Meanwhile, Malik sat at his desk, reading through every file Denise had sent him. He was no longer just a student caught in a viral moment. He was a plaintiff preparing for court. He practiced answering questions aloud. He highlighted inconsistencies in the district's statements. He wrote down every microaggression he remembered, but had never told anyone about. The time Miss Cranley ignored him for an entire semester during group work. The time she told him to watch his tone for asking a question. The time she docked him 10 points for not smiling during a presentation. He wasn't just gathering facts. He was gathering his voice. At midnight, Tyrone entered his room quietly. "You okay?" Malik nodded. "I just keep thinking about all the kids who never got this far. Jamari, Julian, Kira." Tyrone sat on the edge of the bed. "You're carrying them with you into that courtroom. But you're not carrying them alone. We're all with you." Malik closed his journal. "What if nothing changes?" Tyrone met his eyes. "Then we push harder. Until it does." The next morning, news vans lined the street outside their house. Reporters camped on the lawn, microphones ready. Some called out Malik's name when he peeked through the curtain. He stayed inside. He didn't want to become a spectacle. He wanted to become a precedent. Denise arrived with a stack of folders and a new laptop. We're making copies of everything, she said. Redundant drives. Paper backups. They can't bury this again. Latasha brewed coffee. She didn't drink. Her hands shook as she poured. The weight of it all was immense. But so was the clarity. They weren't just fighting a teacher. They were fighting a template. A machine. And for the first time, the machine was faltering. By noon, 3 law firms had offered pro bono representation. A national civil rights organization tweeted their support. A local church volunteered space for legal prep sessions. Malik sat at the table with his family and looked at the growing pile of support letters, legal briefs, and witness statements. This isn't my story anymore, he said quietly. It's everybody's. Exactly, Denise said. And that's why they're scared. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Malik went to his window. Outside, neighbors had left candles on their porches. Students had chalked messages on the sidewalk. We believe Malik. Reform, not revenge. The glow from the candles flickered against the dark. Malik whispered to himself. I'm not a problem. I'm a person. He thought of the courtroom, the suits, the microphones, the eyes of strangers. He wasn't nervous anymore. He was ready. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about reform. And the next step would decide if the system that had buried so many voices would finally have to answer for itself. From the moment the courthouse opened on Monday morning, the building felt different. The air was charged, cameras lined the hallway, microphones clustered near the doors, and onlookers filled every seat in the gallery. Supporters in I'm Not a Problem shirts sat among pastors, former students, teachers, and families. Journalists jostled to find space. Even the judge's bench looked more austere, as though it knew it was stepping into history. Malik, in a dark suit, sat beside Tyrone and Latasha. Denise perched quietly behind a laptop, ready to monitor every transcript. Their attorney, Marisol Gaines, whispered last-minute reminders in Malik's ear. Stay calm, speak clearly. This is our moment. The trial was scheduled to run all week. The district's counsel had arrayed witnesses, expert psychologists, records officers, everything they believed would break their case's foundation. But by day 2 it became clear the district had not accounted for one thing: the power of lived truth. That morning, after technical witnesses and preliminary opening statements, the court recessed for lunch. The gallery buzzed with speculation. Would the school district double down? Would they try to delay? When court reconvened, Gaines stood, approached the bench, and signaled. The judge nodded. The bailiff opened the door. The courtroom hushed. Then Jamari Ellis was sworn in. A hush of recognition swept the gallery. When Jamari took the stand, he looked more composed than he'd expected. He wore a gray button-down, his hair closely cropped, lines of experience visible under his eyes. He glanced at Malik and nodded slightly. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, he began. My name is Jamari Ellis. I was a 7th grader at Oak Ridge Middle School and... He paused. The judge inclined his head. The courtroom held its breath. Jamari continued. I was accused of threatening a teacher. I was expelled that year. No witnesses. No formal hearing. I was 12 years old. I had never been in trouble before. And after that I lost everything I had planned. He spoke evenly, but you could hear where his voice cracked in memories. Scholarship offers vanished. Job interviews ended abruptly when they Googled me. People saw me as angry, violent, dangerous. I lived in that label for years. I shut down. I didn't try anymore. He looked at Ms. Cranley's empty chair across the courtroom. This school didn't just fail me. It erased me. A courtroom murmur rippled. The judge rapped his gavel. Silence. Jamari's testimony was clean, yet haunting. He recounted how he asked for the assignment prompt, repeated. She refused. He raised his voice. She marked it disrespect, and filed a behavioral report. He said she mocked him in front of class. He told about the parent meetings that changed tone until they said, "This will go on your permanent file." Then the twist nobody expected. When Jamari testified that 2 years later, after being expelled, he was contacted by a former teacher, Ms. Kerr, the whistleblower, who apologized, said she had tried to warn him they'd bury his case. The apology, he said, came with permission to reclaim his school records. That teacher had given him copies of the sealed files, including the Do Not Open folder. Jamari had been laying low with those documents for years, waiting for someone like Malik to bring them forward. That revelation, The idea that records held for a decade had not been destroyed but preserved in secret sent shockwaves through the courtroom. It meant the district had known, and someone inside had preserved evidence against itself. The district's lead counsel attempted to object, but the judge overruled. The records were entered into evidence. The gallery gasped. Jamari leaned forward, voice firm. They buried these records so no one would see them. They tried to kill my future by making me invisible. But I'm here, and my name matters. He looked at Malik. You matter, more than I ever believed I would. Tears glinted on Malik's cheeks, though he held himself still. The courtroom felt smaller, charged with a collective realization that this wasn't just one student's fight. It was decades of decay being exposed. Over the next 2 days, witnesses backed Mali's case. Psychologists testified on the long-term effects of humiliation and racial bias in discipline. Data scientists recommended by Marisol Gaines brought charts comparing rates of disciplinary referrals for black versus white students in the district. Denise's spreadsheet became a plotted truth bar graphs, trend lines, red flags. Jamari's testimony was the hint. On day 5 morning, the district offered a settlement. In front of judge, attorneys, and court stenographers, the lead counsel rose. Given the compelling testimony and evidence submitted, the district is prepared to settle. We are willing to provide full expungement of disciplinary records for Malik, compensation for emotional damages, district-wide policy reform, mandatory bias training, and a formal apology to Mr. Trenum and his family. Gaines nodded. She asked for one change, that Malik not accept a cash settlement, but instead earn change. She asked that the district sign enforceable contracts for policy changes, measurable, audited, transparent, and that Cranley be formally reprimanded on record. The district assent was cautious but final. When the judge announced case settled, terms entered into record, the courtroom erupted into restrained applause. Marisol turned, eyes glistening, meeting Malik's from across the aisle. Malik stood. He addressed the court briefly. I didn't come for money. I came for justice. Let this be the start, not the end. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters crowded him. Jamari stepped beside him, putting a hand on his shoulder. Denise and Latasha hugged. Tyrone caught Malik's eye, nodding. But Malik didn't smile. Not wide, not yet. He closed his eyes, thought of every student still fighting in silence. Back in the empty courtroom after hours, Gaines gathered the Trenum family in a side room. She slid a sheet across the table. Look at this, she said. It was the first draft of the district's new policy manual. It included sections on accountability for biased referrals, mandatory third-party review panels, transparent reporting, restorative justice protocol, and community appeals mechanism. She added quietly. They expect resistance. Enforcement will be key. Malik looked at the policy lines as though reading a new language. Everything he had fought for. Everything he had hoped might change. Then, in the margin of the draft, penned in faint black ink, almost invisible, was one line. Remove before adoption clause 14.7. Teacher autonomy and subjective judgment. Marisol raised her eyebrow. They left it there intentionally. They want to preserve a loophole. Malik tapped the line. So they can still claim they have space to be in charge. His voice was cold. Gaines nodded. Will ensure clause 14.7 is removed before final signatures. In the hallway, Jamari stopped Malik. You saved more than your story tonight. Malik nodded. We saved what's possible. As they left the courthouse, supporters chanted. Cameras recorded each step. News vans blocked the street. But when they reached the front doors, a man in a dark suit waited. He looked official. Something about how he held himself made Tyrone frown. He held out a thick envelope. You dropped this in the courtroom. Malik accepted it warily. Inside was a file marked confidential district memo. Retention orders. Denise snatched it and thumbed through pages. Her face paled. One document was dated 2007, long before Cranley's tenure. It was a district-wide directive. Maintain retention of disciplinary records for 25 years. Purge only with express permission. Do not disclose sealed files to public. Another page listed authorized exceptions and gave blanket powers to certain administrators to override FOIA requests. Tyrone's knuckles whitened around his briefcase. Marisol glanced at the memo. This is big. This is systemic. Damari whispered. They built the vaults before they built the school. Malik closed the file slowly. Every step he had taken, every micro shift, every word spoken, had led to this moment. This wasn't victory. It was opening the doors to further fight. As they walked into the sunset from the courthouse, cameras flashing, supporters cheering, Malik looked over his shoulder at the courthouse doors, the stage of his trial, his vindication, and now his new calling. And then Malik did something no one expected. He walked back in and asked the judge to reopen every sealed file district-wide. 2 years had passed since the courthouse settlement. In that time, Oak Ridge and the entire district had shifted in slow, jagged increments. Policies were revised. Training sessions were required. The Trenum family, Denise and Jamari, continued to monitor compliance. But none of that was enough for Malik. He wanted presence. He wanted accountability. He wanted eyes on the classroom. So in the fall, Malik Trenum walked into Oak Ridge Middle again, but as a youth equity advisor, dressed in a modest blazer and slacks, with his journal tucked in his satchel. He passed through the front doors. He felt the weight of memory in every corner, the lockers where he once sat, the hallway where his bag had been thrown, the walls he'd stared at in shame. Now he walked with purpose. He was greeted by Principal Henderson, a younger administrator hired after the scandal. Henderson shook his hand firmly and said, "Welcome home, Malik. We've been preparing for this for months." The welcome sounded official, but Malik watched the principal's eyes. He tested for sincerity. Malik's first assignment was to lead a training for incoming teachers. The small auditorium was filled with nervous smiles, brand new Oak Ridge lanyards, and clean PowerPoint slides, titled Inclusive Practices in the Classroom. Malik sat backstage, journal on a podium beside him, as Principal Henderson introduced him. When his name was called, the audience turned. Teachers straightened. Some nodded, others looked uncertain. Malik swallowed and stepped forward. He opened his journal, same one he had kept since age 13, battered, stained, thick with years of injustice, and read aloud, "If you see a student like me, look again." His voice echoed in the room. He paused. A hush fell. Then Malik began. He told his story quietly, but with clarity, being made invisible. The bag thrown, the notes, the videos, the threats. He spoke of Ms. Cranley's voicemail, and the district's playbook. He quoted from his own journal, how he had written down every slight, every coded phrase. He said, "I'm not here to accuse. I'm here to invite you to look, to notice, to question, to teach differently." He walked through case studies, some from Oak Ridge, others from neighboring schools. He asked teachers to analyze classroom scenarios. Which student gets called out? Which gets second chances? He warned against labeling and urged shared accountability. He introduced new protocols, peer classroom audits, quarterly equity check-ins, student review panels. He paused again, journal open to a blank page. He said, "Now I invite you to write your own protocols, tailored to your classroom, your identity, your biases." He asked them to commit to one change. Hands raised, one by one. "I'll change how I call on students. I'll review referrals before submitting. I'll ask students for permission to record my own judgment." Each small promise was a crack in the old system. Afterward, teachers lingered, asking questions, furtively exchanging stories. Malik answered humbly, but with authority. This was new territory. He was no longer begging to be seen. Now he was demanding the system see itself differently. In the weeks that followed, Malik's presence at Oak Ridge became normalized. He attended department meetings. He sat in on parent-teacher nights. He reviewed behavioral referrals and offered second opinions. He visited classrooms unannounced. His journal, once a private ledger, became a public artifact, reference, teaching aid, challenge. He often walked past room 213, his old classroom. He paused in the hallway, fingers trailing lightly on the doorframe. On the wall behind the glass, a plaque read, "Trenum Equity Lab." It was renamed in his honor. The classroom had been converted into a space for facilitated discussions, bias training, restorative justice circles, and student-led forums. He looked inside. The desks formed a semicircle. Posters on the wall asked, "Who gets heard? Who is silenced?" Student work hung on bulletin boards. Art projects asking, "What did you not see today?" Essays titled "When They Whisper Your Name as a Problem." Workshops announced, "Identity and Power." Malik inhaled. The room felt sacred. He stepped aside and let another teacher enter. A teacher he had once feared. Someone he once watched dismiss him. She looked up at the plaque, swallowed. and then nodded. Outside, word spread. Other schools in the district invited Malik to speak. He traveled weekly, middle schools, high schools, conferences. Wherever he went, the same phrase followed him. If you see a student like me, look again. Under his guidance, one neighboring school launched reflection hours, where students could revisit disciplinary referrals. Another school created a bias review committee, made of teachers, administrators, and students. A third used his journal quote on their student handbooks. The movement became cultural, not just personal. Still, change was far from complete. Some teachers resisted, some parents demanded discipline over discussion. Some districts refused his invitations. He received anonymous emails. Stop rewriting history. You're dangerous. Stick to your lane. But those faded compared to the invitations, the gratitude, the small shifts in classroom culture. One afternoon, Malik sat with a group of students in the equity lab. They discussed an assignment. Name a time you felt unseen. A shy freshman named Elijah raised his hand and said quietly, "When I always ask to go to the bathroom, and the teacher says I'm just trying to get out." Someone else, a girl named Marisol, said, "I raise my hand but she picks someone else. I feel like if I speak, I'll be the troublemaker." Their words were raw. Their voices needed space. Malik closed his journal, placed it in his lap. He said, "What I want you to know is, being silent doesn't protect you. Silence is insurance for the system. It wants you to believe your voice is noise, but your voice is the signal." The students listened. Some nodded. Some cried quietly. Malik looked at each of them. He knew what silence did. He knew what visibility cost. But he believed they were worth it. In the hallway after class, Malik ran into Jordan, his old friend. Jordan had become a paraprofessional at Oak Ridge. They spoke quietly. Jordan said, "I used to be afraid to sit where they moved you. Now I sit with students. They moved with them." Malik smiled, though tired. "That's change, man." Jordan nodded. "You gave me back a classroom I thought was lost." As Malik left for the day, he passed Miss Cranley's old office. It was now painted neutral, the nameplate removed. He paused and looked inside. The door was slightly ajar. He glimpsed a box on a shelf, a cardboard box with his name scrawled on it, Malik Trinham Papers. He reached in through the doorway and retrieved the box. Inside, his old essays, notebooks, classwork from middle school, graded papers with comments like "too loud," "tone is off," "needs more decorum," the red pens, the corrections, the margins full of critique. He held them carefully, memory and relish. He stepped into the hallway and saw a new student walking in, fresh-faced, early teen, backpack low, similar to the image he once was. The student glanced down the hall, unsure where to go. Malik approached him quietly. "Hey," Malik said softly. "Need help?" The student looked up, startled. Malik smiled. "I'm Malik. I'm here to help if you need someone to see you." The student's eyes widened. He nodded slowly. Malik walked him down the hallway. Together they passed room 20. The plaque glinted. Trinham Equity Lab. The student looked up. Malik glanced over his shoulder, the old hallway stretching before him. And in that moment, he thought of every kid who'd walked these halls unseen. And yet somewhere in another school, another Malik walks in. Will anyone see him before it's too late? No child should be made to feel invisible for the color of their skin. No voice should be silenced just because it speaks the truth. If you've ever seen this happen, or felt it yourself, don't scroll past. Type yes if you believe every kid deserves to be seen. Subscribe if this broke your heart.